The door chimed as Aria Novak burst into the bookstore, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. And without thinking, she ducked behind the first tall shelf she could find, pressing her back against worn spines that smelled of old paper and possibility. She tried to catch her breath quietly, listening for footsteps on the sidewalk outside, praying desperately that Marcus hadn't seen which direction she'd gone. The afternoon sunlight filtered through the bookstore's front windows, casting long shadows across hardwood floors that creaked slightly under her weight as she shifted. This was ridiculous. She was 24 years old, hiding in a bookstore like a teenager avoiding an ex-boyfriend. Except Marcus wasn't an ex. He was her former boss who'd made the last 6 months of her life at the marketing firm absolutely unbearable with his constant boundary violations and refusal to accept that she wasn't interested in his advances. She'd quit 3 weeks ago, changed her regular coffee shop, altered her usual route to the grocery store, even stopped going to her favorite Thai restaurant because he'd shown up there twice. And yet somehow he'd spotted her today on the street, calling her name with that entitled familiarity that made her skin crawl. And she'd done what any sensible woman would do when being pursued by someone who couldn't take no for answer. She'd run. "You can come out," a voice said from somewhere deeper in the store, startling her so badly she nearly knocked over a display of paperback mysteries. "He's still out there, but he's looking the other way." Aria froze. The voice was male, low and calm, with an undertone of amusement that somehow didn't feel mocking. She peered around the shelf and saw a man standing near the front window, partially concealed by a display but clearly watching the street. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with dark hair that looked like he'd run his hands through it recently and broad shoulders that filled out a simple gray sweater in a way that suggested he didn't spend all his time surrounded by books. "I wasn't," she started, then gave up on the lie. "Is he really still out there, pacing back and forth, checking his phone, looking in shop windows?" The man turned toward her, and Aria felt her breath catch slightly. He had the kind of face that belonged in old movies, all strong jaw and sharp cheekbones, but it was his eyes that held her, dark and intelligent and currently focused on her with an intensity that should have been unsettling but somehow wasn't. "Want me to lock the door?" "You can't lock customers out in the middle of the afternoon," Aria said automatically, even as every instinct screamed yes. "Lock the door, keep him out, keep me safe. I can do whatever I want. It's my store." He moved toward the entrance with an easy confidence, and before Aria could protest further, she heard the definite click of a deadbolt sliding home. He flipped the small sign in the window from open to closed, then adjusted the blinds to obscure the view from outside. "There. Now we wait him out." Aria's mind raced. "But your customers, you're losing business. I can't just relax." He walked past her toward the back of the store, gesturing for her to follow. "It's a Tuesday afternoon. You're the first person who's come in here in 2 hours, and you weren't exactly here to browse. Come on. I have coffee in the back, and you look like you could use some." She hesitated, weighing the strangeness of following an unknown man to the back of his locked bookstore against the alternative of standing near the front, where Marcus might spot her through a gap in the blinds. The bookstore owner glanced back at her, and something in his expression, patient and understanding without being pitying, made the decision for her. She followed. The back room was small and surprisingly tidy, with a desk covered in paperwork, several boxes of books waiting to be unpacked, and a coffee maker that looked expensive and well used. He poured her a cup without asking, somehow knowing she'd want it black, and handed it to her before pouring his own. "Gabriel Whitmore," he said, extending his hand. "Aria Novak." His handshake was firm and warm, and she found herself holding on a second longer than necessary before letting go. "Thank you for this. I know it's weird, he wouldn't stop following me and I panicked." "Ex-boyfriend." Gabriel leaned against the desk, cradling his coffee and watching her with those steady eyes. "Ex-boss. Worse than ex-boyfriend, actually, because I never even dated him to begin with. He just decided I was interested and wouldn't believe otherwise." The words came out more bitter than she'd intended. "I quit my job because of him. Filed a complaint with HR first, but he's the nephew of one of the senior partners, so that went nowhere. So I quit, and I thought that would be the end of it, but he keeps, I don't know, appearing places." "That's called stalking," Gabriel said bluntly. "Have you filed a police report?" "He hasn't technically done anything illegal. He calls and texts, but I blocked him. He shows up places, but they're public places. Today was the first time he's actually followed me, and I don't have proof." Aria wrapped both hands around the coffee mug, absorbing its warmth. "I sound paranoid." "You sound like someone whose instincts are telling her she's in danger, and you're probably right." Gabriel set down his coffee and pulled out his phone. "I'm going to check if he's still out there. What does he look like?" "Blonde hair, expensive suit, probably gray or navy, tall but not as tall as you, carries himself like someone who's never been told no by anyone who mattered." The description came easily. She'd spent too much time trying to avoid Marcus not to have memorized every detail. Gabriel disappeared back into the main store, and Aria took the opportunity to actually look around the back room. Despite the boxes and paperwork, there was an order to everything. The books waiting to be shelved were organized by genre. The paperwork was neatly stacked, and there was a framed photograph on the desk of what looked like Gabriel with an older couple, all three of them laughing at something outside the frame. It felt lived in and real, like someone actually worked here rather than just played at running a bookstore. He returned a few minutes later, his expression thoughtful. "He's gone. Left about a minute ago, heading west, but I don't think you should leave right away just in case he's circling back." Relief made her knees weak, and Aria sank into the chair near the desk without being invited. "Thank you. Really. I'm sorry for barging in here and making you close your store. Like I said, Tuesday afternoon, you saved me from inventory, which is my least favorite task anyway." Gabriel reclaimed his coffee, but instead of sitting behind the desk, he pulled up a second chair and sat across from her, maintaining a respectful distance. "How long has this been going on?" 6 months while I was still working there, 3 weeks since I quit. But it's getting worse, not better. More frequent." Aria heard the exhaustion in her own voice. "I'm looking for a new job, but I'm scared to list him as a reference, and most of the good positions in my field want references from my most recent employer. I'm running through my savings. I'm avoiding half the city. I feel like my entire life has shrunk down to this tiny, careful existence, and I hate it." "What field?" Gabriel asked. "Marketing. Brand development, specifically. I actually loved what I did before Marcus made it impossible." She couldn't quite keep the longing from her voice. "I was good at it, too. I helped relaunch a heritage chocolate company, and their sales increased 40% in the first quarter. But none of that matters when you can't get a decent reference." Gabriel was quiet for a moment, his fingers drumming a thoughtful rhythm against his coffee mug. "You know, I've been thinking about expanding. This store has been here for 15 years, and it has a loyal customer base, but it could be doing better. I've been so focused on keeping it running that I haven't thought much about growth, about reaching new customers or building the brand beyond word of mouth. But I don't know anything about marketing." Aria's heart jumped. "Are you offering me a job? I'm thinking about it." He met her eyes directly. "I can't pay what a big firm would, not right away, but I can pay fairly. And you wouldn't have to worry about references because I'm hiring you based on this conversation and my gut instinct that you know what you're talking about. Plus, I'm very good at respecting boundaries and taking no for an answer. You don't know anything about me, Aria protested, even as hope bloomed bright and desperate in her chest. I could be terrible at my job. That story about the chocolate company could be completely made up. Is it? No, and you didn't come in here looking for a handout or sympathy. You came in here because you were scared and needed safety, and even now you're thinking about my business interests and whether it makes sense for me to hire you. Gabriel smiled, and it transformed his entire face from handsome to genuinely warm. I'm a pretty good judge of character. Comes from years of recommending books to strangers. You have to be able to read people to put the right story in their hands. This is insane, Aria said, but she was smiling too. You don't just offer jobs to people who hide in your bookstore. First time for everything. Besides, I've been putting off hiring help because I couldn't stand the thought of dealing with resumes and interviews and all that formal nonsense. This is much better. He stood and refilled both their coffee cups without asking. Think about it, no pressure. But if you're interested, we could start with a trial period. A month, maybe. You develop some marketing strategies for the store. I see if they work. And we both figure out if this is a good fit. It was ridiculous. It was impulsive and strange and nothing like the careful, planned career moves Aria had always made before. But her careful planning had led her to Marcus's firm, to 6 months of documented complaints that went nowhere, to quitting without another job lined up. Maybe impulsive was exactly what she needed. Okay, she heard herself say. Yes, I'm interested. But I need to ask, is this really about marketing, or do you feel sorry for me? Gabriel's expression turned serious. I don't feel sorry for you. I'm angry on your behalf that you had to deal with someone who abused his power and made your workplace hostile. But that's different from pity. And yes, this is really about marketing. I wouldn't offer you a job that didn't need doing. The store needs help and you need work. It's practical. Practical, Aria repeated, testing the word. She liked it. Practical made sense. Practical wasn't charity. Okay then. When would you want me to start? Take a few days. Get your bearings, maybe do some research on the store. I have a website that hasn't been updated since 2019 and a social media presence that consists of a Facebook page my sister set up and posts to occasionally. There's a lot of room for improvement. He pulled out a business card from the desk drawer and handed it to her. My cell number is on there. Text me when you're ready and we'll work out the details. Aria took the card, running her thumb over the embossed lettering. Whitmore Books, established 2011, and an address she now recognized as exactly where she was standing. How did a bookstore end up being established in 2011? That's not exactly the golden age of independent bookshops. Long story. The short version is I had money to invest and no interest in doing what my family expected me to do with it. Gabriel's tone suggested that the long version was much more complicated, but he wasn't ready to share it with someone he'd just met. Fair enough. Aria had her own complicated stories. Well, I'm glad you chose books, she said. The world needs more bookstores. Agreed. He glanced at his watch. It's been about 20 minutes. I think you're probably safe to leave, but I'll walk you to your car if you want or call you a cab. I took the bus, Aria admitted. My car died last month and I couldn't afford to fix it and pay rent, so rent one. Then I'll drive you home. Gabriel said it like it was already decided, and when Aria started to protest, he held up a hand. Not negotiable. That guy made you scared enough to run into a stranger's bookstore and hide. I'm not letting you stand at a bus stop where he could come back and find you exposed. Besides, you're potentially my new employee. I have a vested interest in making sure you get home safely." Aria wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could take care of herself, but the truth was she'd been running on adrenaline and fear for 3 weeks now, and the thought of someone else being the strong one for a few minutes was almost impossibly appealing. "Okay, thank you." Gabriel locked up the back room and led her through the store to a side door she hadn't noticed, which opened into a narrow alley where a sleek black car was parked. Not flashy, but definitely expensive. Aria found herself reassessing her new potential employer. The bookstore was small and clearly not a major moneymaker, but the car suggested resources beyond what she'd assumed. The drive to her apartment took 15 minutes through downtown traffic, and they spent it talking about books, of all things. Gabriel wanted to know what she read, and Aria found herself confessing her love for sprawling historical novels and literary fiction that made her think. He recommended 3 titles off the top of his head, describing each one with the kind of passion that made her want to read them immediately. "You really love this," she said as he pulled up outside her building, which was shabby but safe, in a neighborhood that was more tired than dangerous. "I really do," Gabriel agreed. "Books saved my life once. Sounds dramatic, but it's true. I figured if they could do that for me, maybe I could pass that along to other people. Create a space where someone could find exactly the story they needed exactly when they needed it." Aria wanted to ask how books had saved his life, wanted to know everything about this stranger who'd locked his door to keep her safe and offered her a job, and was now sitting in the fading afternoon light looking at her like she was someone worth knowing. But it was too soon and she was too raw, and some stories required time. "I'll text you in a couple days," she said instead. "And Gabriel, thank you for all of it." "You're welcome, Aria. Lock your door when you get inside." She did, and from her 3rd-floor window, she watched his car pull away into traffic. Then she sat on her ancient couch in her tiny apartment and let herself cry, just a little, from relief and exhaustion and the strange, unexpected hope that maybe things were about to get better. 3 days later, Aria stood outside Whitmore Books with her laptop bag over her shoulder and a notebook full of ideas in her hand. She'd spent the past 72 hours doing something she'd been too afraid to do during her job search. Actual research that excited her. The bookstore had potential, so much potential. Its location was excellent, right in the arts district surrounded by cafes and galleries. The building itself was beautiful, old brick with large windows that would be perfect for creative displays. And Gabriel's inventory, which she'd browsed through on that first day, was carefully curated, skewing toward literary fiction and classics, but with surprising selections in every genre that suggested someone with genuine knowledge was making the purchasing decisions. The problem was visibility. The website was indeed stuck in 2019, the social media presence was minimal, and there was no clear brand identity beyond small bookstore with good selection. Aria could work with that. She could work with all of it. Gabriel was helping a customer when she walked in, an elderly woman who seemed to be looking for something specific. Aria watched him work, the way he listened carefully, asked thoughtful questions, and then disappeared into the stacks to emerge with 3 different options, explaining why he thought each one might be what she was looking for. The woman left happy with 2 books and a promise to come back and tell him what she thought. "That was impressive," Aria said when the door chimed closed behind the customer. Gabriel turned, and his face lit up with a smile that did unreasonable things to her pulse. "Aria, you came. Did you think I wouldn't? I thought you might have decided I was too weird, offering a job to someone who ran into my store being chased by her stalker ex-boss." He gestured her toward the back room, which she now noticed had been cleaned up since her last visit. The boxes were gone, the desk was clearer, and there was a second chair that looked newer than everything else, like he'd brought it in specifically for her. "Are you too weird?" Aria asked, settling into the new chair. "Probably. But I'm reliable, and I pay on time, and I make good coffee, so it balances out." Gabriel pulled out a folder from the desk drawer. "I put together some information for you. Sales figures from the past 3 years, customer demographics as far as I can tell, inventory lists, the disaster that is my accounting system. I figured you'd want data." Aria took the folder, surprised by the thoroughness. "You figured right. Can I ask you something? Anything?" "Why books?" "You said it was a long story, but I'd like to hear it if you're willing to share." She met his eyes. "I like to understand what I'm marketing. The story behind something is usually what makes it compelling." Gabriel was quiet for a moment, and Aria worried she'd pushed too far too fast. But then he leaned back in his chair and started talking. "My family has money. A lot of it. My grandfather built a pharmaceutical company from nothing, and my father expanded it into something massive. I grew up in boarding schools and summer homes, learning about profit margins and hostile takeovers, being groomed to take over the company eventually." His voice was matter-of-fact, but Aria could hear the old tension beneath it. "When I was 23, my older brother died. Car accident. He was the one who was supposed to take over, the one who actually wanted that life. I was supposed to be the backup, the spare heir, but suddenly I was the only option." "I'm sorry," Aria said quietly. "Thank you. It was 12 years ago, but some losses don't fade." Gabriel rubbed his jaw, a gesture Aria was beginning to recognize as something he did when thinking through difficult things. "After he died, I fell apart. Stopped eating, stopped sleeping, stopped pretending I was okay. My parents sent me to therapy, which helped, but what really saved me was books. I started reading constantly, obsessively, everything I could get my hands on. Stories about people who survived impossible things, who rebuilt their lives after tragedy, who found meaning in the wreckage. It gave me a framework for grief that nothing else did." Aria found herself leaning forward, drawn into the story. "So when my parents pressured me to take my place at the company, I said no. Used my trust fund to buy this building and opened a bookstore instead. They thought I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. But this place, these books, this has been the only thing that's ever felt right to me." Gabriel's eyes met hers. "That's the story. The bookstore exists because I needed it to, and because I think other people need it too, even if they don't know it yet." "That's a beautiful story," Aria said, and meant it. "And you're right, it's compelling. People connect with authenticity, with real reasons for doing things. This isn't just a business to you, it's personal. That matters." "So you think you can work with that?" Gabriel asked. "I know I can." Aria opened her notebook, suddenly eager to share what she'd been working on. "I have ideas. A lot of them. But first I need to ask, what are your goals for this place? Do you want to expand, open more locations, build an empire? Or do you want to stay small and just make this one store as successful as possible?" "The second one," Gabriel said without hesitation. "I'm not interested in an empire. I like being here, knowing my customers, handpicking the inventory. I just want this store to thrive, to reach the people who would love it if they knew it existed. Financial stability would be nice too." Aria grinned. "Then I have the perfect strategy for you. We're going to make Whitmore Books the bookstore everyone in the city knows about and wants to visit. Not through gimmicks or aggressive advertising, but through authenticity and community building. We're going to tell your story, showcase your expertise, and create experiences that people can't get from ordering online." For the next 2 hours, they talked through her ideas. A complete website redesign with an updated inventory system and online ordering. An active social media presence featuring book recommendations, behind-the-scenes content, and customer features. Monthly author events and book clubs. Partnerships with local schools and libraries. A loyalty program that rewarded frequent customers. Window displays that changed weekly and told visual stories. A newsletter with Gabriel's personal recommendations and bookstore news. Gabriel listened to everything, asking smart questions and occasionally suggesting modifications that showed he understood his business and his customers. They worked together easily, ideas building on each other, and Aria felt that familiar creative buzz that she'd missed so much over the past few months. This was what she was good at. This was what she loved. "This is going to be a lot of work," Gabriel said finally, but he was smiling. "For both of us." "The best things usually are," Aria replied. "Are you in?" "I'm in." "When can you start?" "How about now?" They shook on it, and Aria felt the warmth of his hand even after he'd let go. She told herself it was just excitement about the project, about having meaningful work again. But she was self-aware enough to know that wasn't the whole truth. Gabriel was attractive, yes, but more than that he was interesting, kind, and passionate about something that mattered. Those were dangerous qualities in an employer. But she needed this job, and she needed it to work, so she firmly pushed those thoughts aside and focused on the practical next steps. They spent the rest of the afternoon going through the existing website, with Aria making notes about what needed to change and Gabriel occasionally disappearing to help customers who came in. She was surprised by the steady stream of people, everyone from college students to retirees, all of whom seemed to know Gabriel personally. "You have a solid customer base," she observed during a lull. "These people love you." "They love the store," Gabriel corrected. "But yes, there's a core group who come in regularly. That's the foundation we're building on." "Do you know their names? Their reading preferences?" When Gabriel nodded, Aria's mind raced ahead. "That's valuable data. With their permission, we could build detailed customer profiles, send personalized recommendations, make them feel seen and valued, which they clearly already do, but we can systematize it, scale it up without losing the personal touch." "You're really good at this," Gabriel said, and there was something in his voice that made Aria look up from her notes. "Thank you," she said simply. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm that felt both comfortable and exhilarating. Aria came in every morning at 9, staying until 6, working at the desk in the back room or sometimes out in the store when Gabriel needed an extra pair of hands. She rebuilt the website from the ground up, using a designer she'd worked with before who owed her a favor. She created social media accounts and started posting daily content, mixing professional book photography with candid shots of the store and Gabriel's handwritten recommendation cards. The response was immediate and surprising. People loved the behind-the-scenes glimpses, the personal touch of Gabriel's recommendations, the sense that this was a real place run by real people who cared about books. Followers grew, engagement climbed, and within 3 weeks, foot traffic had increased by 20%. "This is working," Gabriel said one afternoon, showing her the sales figures. "I haven't seen numbers like this since the store opened." Aria felt pride glow warm in her chest. "This is just the beginning. Wait until we launch the event series and the loyalty program." They'd been planning the first author event, a reading and signing with a local novelist whose debut had gotten excellent reviews. Aria had reached out through her old contacts, positioned it as an intimate gathering at a beloved independent bookstore, and the author had agreed immediately. Now they just needed to get people to show up. "How many seats should we set up?" Gabriel asked, looking at the open space near the back of the store that could be rearranged for events. "Start with 40. We can always add more if we need to. Aria was already designing the promotional materials in her head. I'll run targeted social media ads, reach out to local book bloggers, send a newsletter to your customer base. We'll fill those seats. She was right. By the day of the event, they'd had to cap registration at 60 people because they literally couldn't fit anyone else. Gabriel looked nervous as they rearranged the store that afternoon, setting up chairs and a small podium area. What if it's a disaster? He asked, adjusting a chair for the third time. It won't be, Aria assured him. You're a natural with people, the author is talented and personable, and we have wine and snacks. That's a winning combination. When did we decide on wine and snacks? I decided 2 days ago and ordered everything. Don't worry about it. Aria was checking the sound system they'd rented, making sure the microphone worked properly. She was in her element, managing the logistics, anticipating problems before they arose. This was what she'd been trained to do, and it felt incredible to be doing it again. The event was a success beyond anything Aria had hoped. People crowded into the store, bought books, asked questions, and stayed afterward to talk and browse. Several mentioned they'd never been to the store before, but had seen it on social media and wanted to check it out. Gabriel was in constant motion, chatting with customers, ringing up sales, making recommendations. Aria watched him work and felt something warm and complicated unfurl in her chest. She'd been carefully professional for the past month, maintaining appropriate boundaries, reminding herself that Gabriel was her employer, and she needed this job too much to complicate it. But watching him now, his face animated as he talked about books with genuine enthusiasm, his hands gesturing expressively, his laugh coming easily and often, she felt her careful control start to slip. Aria, come here, Gabriel called, waving her over to where he stood with an older couple. I was just telling Margaret and Tom about your marketing work. They own the gallery 2 blocks down and were asking for recommendations. She joined them, slipping easily into professional mode, discussing strategies and offering advice. But she was intensely aware of Gabriel standing next to her, close enough that she could feel the heat of him, smell the faint scent of coffee and old books that seemed to cling to him. When his hand brushed her arm to get her attention, she felt electricity skitter across her skin. This was a problem. Later, after everyone had left and they were cleaning up, Gabriel opened a bottle of the leftover wine and poured 2 glasses. To successful events, he said, handing her one. To successful events, Aria echoed, clinking her glass against his. The wine was good, smooth and rich, and she felt herself relax after the intensity of the evening. You were amazing tonight, Gabriel said. The way you coordinated everything, talked to people, made it all seem effortless. I would have been a nervous wreck trying to organize this alone. That's why you hired me, Aria said lightly, trying to ignore the pleased warmth his praise created. I hired you because you ran into my store being chased, and I saw an opportunity to help someone who deserved better than what she'd gotten. Gabriel set down his wine glass and looked at her directly. But I kept you because you're brilliant at what you do and this place is better with you in it. Aria's heart was doing complicated things in her chest. Gabriel, I know, this is wildly unprofessional and you're my employee and I swore I was good at boundaries. He ran his hand through his hair, that gesture of uncertainty she'd come to recognize. But I need to be honest with you. Working with you this past month has been the best month I've had in years, not just because the store is doing better, but because you're here. I look forward to 9 o'clock every morning because that's when you walk through the door. I find excuses to need your opinion on things so we can talk. I'm 35 years old and I feel like a teenager with a crush, which is ridiculous and inappropriate, and I'm sorry." Aria's hands were shaking slightly. She set down her wine glass before she dropped it. "You're not the only one," she said quietly. Gabriel's eyes widened. "What?" "I said you're not the only one." Aria made herself meet his gaze, made herself be brave. "I've been telling myself for weeks that I can't feel this way, that I need this job too much to risk it, that you're my boss and it would be messy and complicated. But watching you tonight, seeing how much you care about this place and these people, I couldn't keep lying to myself. I like you, Gabriel, a lot, and I don't know what to do about it." The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility. Then Gabriel smiled, slow and genuine and full of something that looked like relief. "We could try figuring it out together," he suggested. "Carefully, with lots of communication and clear boundaries between work and personal life, if you want to." "That sounds terrifyingly reasonable," Aria said, but she was smiling too. "Is that a yes?" "That's a yes." Gabriel crossed the space between them in 2 steps, and then his hands were cupping her face gently, giving her every opportunity to pull back, to change her mind. But Aria leaned into his touch instead, and when he kissed her it was soft and questioning and perfect. She felt it all the way to her toes, this kiss in a bookstore after midnight surrounded by stories and possibility. When they finally pulled apart, Gabriel rested his forehead against hers. "I want to do this right," he said. "You're important to me, and not just because you're saving my business. I don't want to mess this up." "Then we won't," Aria said with more confidence than she felt. "We're both adults. We can handle this." She believed it in that moment, standing in the warm circle of his arms with the taste of wine and promise on her lips. But belief and reality weren't always the same thing, and she would learn that lesson sooner than she expected. The next few weeks were a careful dance of maintaining professionalism at work, while exploring something new and fragile in their personal time. Gabriel took her to dinner at a quiet Italian restaurant where the pasta was handmade and the wine list was extensive. They went to a movie and held hands in the dark theater like teenagers. He invited her to his apartment, which turned out to be a converted warehouse loft filled with books and windows and comfortable furniture that looked lived in and loved. "This is incredible," Aria said, turning in a slow circle to take it all in. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves covered 2 walls, a massive kitchen took up another, and the entire back wall was windows overlooking the city. "It's too much space for one person," Gabriel admitted. "But I bought it right after I opened the store and I haven't been able to bring myself to leave. Every room has good light for reading." They cooked dinner together, something simple with fresh vegetables and good bread, and talked about everything and nothing. Gabriel told her about his brother, about the complicated relationship with his parents who still couldn't understand why he'd chosen books over business. Aria told him about growing up in a working-class neighborhood with parents who worked multiple jobs to give her opportunities, about the pressure she'd felt to succeed, to prove their sacrifices worthwhile. "Is that why you stayed at that firm so long even after Marcus made it unbearable?" Gabriel asked, refilling her wine glass. "Partly. I felt like quitting was giving up, admitting failure. My parents didn't raise a quitter." Aria traced the rim of her glass. "But also I was scared. Scared I wouldn't find another job. Scared I'd lose my apartment. Scared I'd have to move back home at 24 with nothing to show for my expensive degree and all those years of working my way up." "You're not a failure," Gabriel said firmly. "You stood up for yourself when the system failed you. That takes courage. Some days I believe that. Other days I just feel like I ran away." She looked up at him. "But finding your bookstore, finding you, that's made everything feel less like running away and more like running toward something better." He kissed her then, deep and slow, and when he pulled her toward the couch, she went willingly, losing herself in the feeling of his hands and mouth, the solid reality of him. They didn't go further than kissing that night, both of them cautious about moving too fast, but it felt like a promise of more when they were ready. At work, they tried to maintain professionalism, but it was hard when they kept finding excuses to stand close to each other, when their hands would brush reaching for the same book, when their eyes would meet across the store and hold just a moment too long. Aria worried that customers would notice, but if they did, no one seemed to mind. The bookstore continued to thrive. Aria launched the loyalty program and newsletter, both of which were immediate hits. She organized a second author event, then a third, establishing Whitmore Books as a premier venue for local literary events. A feature article in the City magazine about independent bookstores highlighted Gabriel's store prominently, thanks to Aria's strategic outreach to the journalist. "We're up 45% over this time last year," Gabriel announced one morning, showing her the quarterly reports. "Aria, this is incredible. You've completely transformed this place." "We transformed it," Aria corrected. "I just helped people see what was already here." Gabriel looked at her with such open affection that her breath caught. "Have dinner with me this weekend. Somewhere nice. I want to celebrate." "That sounds perfect." But Friday afternoon, as Aria was preparing to leave, her phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Aria, finally. You've been impossible to reach." Marcus's voice was exactly as she remembered, smooth and entitled, and setting her nerves on edge immediately. Her hand tightened around the phone. "How did you get this number?" "I have my ways. Listen, I'm calling because I want to apologize. I think we got off on the wrong foot and I'd like to make things right. Can we meet for coffee and talk?" "No." The word came out hard and definite. "Aria, be reasonable. I'm trying to extend an olive branch here." "The least you could do is hear me out." "I said no, Marcus. I don't want to have coffee with you. I don't want to talk to you. I want you to stop calling me, stop following me, and leave me alone." "Following you? I haven't been following you." "I ran into you that one time downtown and you completely overreacted." His voice took on an edge. "You're being paranoid." "Stop calling me," Aria repeated and hung up, her hands shaking. Gabriel emerged from the back room, concern etched on his face. "What's wrong? You're pale," Marcus called. "I don't know how he got my new number." Fear curled in her stomach. "He wants to meet to talk. Said I'm being paranoid about him following me. That's gaslighting." Gabriel's expression went hard in a way Aria had never seen before. Classic abuser tactic. "Make you doubt your own perceptions and experiences." "You're not paranoid, Aria. Your instincts were right." "I know, I just—" Her phone rang again. Same number. She declined the call, but it rang again immediately, and again. Gabriel gently took the phone from her trembling hands and answered it himself. "This is Gabriel Whitmore. Aria has made it clear she doesn't want to speak with you. If you continue to call or contact her in any way, we will file a formal police report and pursue a restraining order." "Do you understand?" Aria couldn't hear Marcus's response, but she saw Gabriel's jaw tighten. "I'm not her boyfriend, not that it's any of your business. I'm someone who respects when a woman says no, which you clearly don't. This is your only warning. Leave her alone." He hung up and immediately blocked the number before handing the phone back to Aria. "We're filing a report. Today. I'll come with you if you want." He'll just say it was a misunderstanding, that he was trying to apologize. But even as she said it, Aria knew Gabriel was right. The fear she'd been trying to minimize for months was valid, and Marcus's behavior was escalating. "Then we create a paper trail," Gabriel said. "If he contacts you again, there's documentation. And if he shows up here, I'm calling the police immediately." They went to the police station that afternoon, and while the officer who took their report was sympathetic, he confirmed what Aria had feared. Without explicit threats or proof of sustained harassment, there wasn't much they could do beyond documenting the incident. But he gave them information about restraining orders and encouraged Aria to keep records of any further contact. Dinner that night was at Gabriel's apartment instead of the restaurant they'd planned. Aria was too shaken to want to be in public, and Gabriel seemed to understand without her having to explain. He cooked while she sat at the kitchen island, watching his confident movements and trying to let the normalcy of it calm her nerves. "Tell me about something good," she said. "Tell me a story about the bookstore, about a customer who found exactly the right book at exactly the right time." Gabriel glanced at her, understanding what she needed. "Last year, a woman came in looking for a gift for her teenage daughter who was going through a hard time. Wouldn't talk to her parents, wasn't eating, spending all her time alone in her room. The mom was desperate, trying anything to connect with her. I recommended a book about a girl who goes on a road trip to find herself after a family tragedy. Nothing preaky, just a good story about figuring out who you are when everything falls apart." He plated the food, simple grilled chicken and roasted vegetables, and brought it to the table. "The mom came back 3 weeks later and told me her daughter had read the entire book in one sitting, then came downstairs and wanted to talk about it. That conversation led to others, and they started communicating again. She said that book was a bridge when she didn't think there were any left." "That's beautiful," Aria said softly. "That's why I do this. Those moments when the right story reaches the right person at the right time and changes something fundamental. It doesn't happen every day, but it happens often enough to matter." They ate and talked about lighter things, and gradually Aria felt the tension leave her shoulders. Being with Gabriel made her feel safe in a way she hadn't felt since before Marcus started his campaign of harassment. But more than safety, she felt seen and valued and respected. Gabriel listened when she talked, remembered small details she'd mentioned in passing, made her laugh when she needed it most. After dinner, they moved to the couch, and Aria curled into Gabriel's side, letting his arm around her shoulders anchor her. "Thank you," she said. "For today, for coming with me, for being on my side." "Always," Gabriel said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "You don't have to thank me for basic decency, but you're welcome anyway. It's not basic decency, though. You went out of your way, took time from your business, stood up to someone you've never even met because I needed you to. That's more than basic decency. That's caring." Gabriel turned her face up to his expression serious. "I do care, a lot. More than is probably wise given that we've only known each other a couple months, but I can't seem to help it." "I care too," Aria whispered, and then she was kissing him, pouring all her confused emotions into the press of her lips against his. Gabriel kissed her back with an intensity that made her forget about Marcus, about fear, about everything except this moment and this man. When things started to get heated, Gabriel pulled back, breathing hard. "Aria, wait. I want this, I want you, but not like this. Not when you've had a terrible day and you're scared and looking for distraction. When we do this, I want it to be because we both want it, not because you're trying to forget something else." Aria wanted to argue, wanted to lose herself in physical sensation and not think for a while. But she knew he was right. "You're too good," she said, only half joking. "Not too good, just trying to do this right." Gabriel kissed her forehead gently. "Stay here tonight, take the bed, I'll take the couch. I just want to know you're safe." She agreed, too tired and emotionally wrung out to argue. Gabriel lent her clothes to sleep in, made sure she had everything she needed, and kissed her goodnight with a tenderness that made her chest ache. She fell asleep in his bed surrounded by the scent of him, feeling protected and cared for in a way that was entirely new. The next few weeks were blissfully Marcus-free. No calls, no messages, no mysterious appearances downtown. Aria started to relax, to believe that maybe Gabriel's warning had actually worked. The bookstore continued to flourish, and her relationship with Gabriel deepened into something real and sustaining. They moved carefully, both aware of the potential complications of mixing business with romance, but it seemed to be working. Aria met Gabriel's parents for the first time at a charity gala they'd insisted he attend. She'd been nervous, knowing about their disapproval of his choices, but Gabriel had held her hand and introduced her with obvious pride as the woman who'd saved his bookstore and his sanity. His mother was elegant and cool, assessing Aria with shrewd eyes that missed nothing. His father was gruff, but not unkind, asking pointed questions about her background and education. Aria held her own, neither intimidated nor trying too hard to impress, and by the end of the evening she thought she'd at least earned their cautious respect. "They liked you," Gabriel said on the drive home, sounding surprised. "Your mother thinks I'm too young and your father thinks I'm not rich enough, but they both think I'm smart and good for you," Aria said. "I'll take it. How did you possibly get all that from one dinner?" "I'm good at reading people. It's part of what makes me good at marketing." She squeezed his hand. "And they love you even if they don't understand your choices." That came through clearly. Gabriel lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. "Have I mentioned lately that you're extraordinary?" "Not in the last few hours. I was starting to worry." But she was smiling, warm and happy and more content than she'd been in years. They went back to Gabriel's apartment, and this time when things heated up on the couch, neither of them pulled back. They moved to the bedroom together, shedding clothes and inhibitions, and made love with a tenderness and passion that left Aria breathless and overwhelmed in the best possible way. Afterward, lying tangled together in the sheets, Gabriel traced patterns on her bare shoulder and told her he was falling in love with her. "I'm already there," Aria admitted. "Have been for weeks. I was just too scared to say it." "Don't be scared," Gabriel said, tilting her face up to kiss her softly. "Not of this. Whatever else happens, this is real and good and we'll figure it out together." She believed him. That was the beautiful, terrifying thing. She believed in him, in them, in the future they were building together one day at a time. But 3 days later, Marcus showed up at the bookstore. Aria was alone in the front, organizing a new display of fall releases, while Gabriel was at a meeting with a potential investor who wanted to help expand the events series. She heard the door chime and called out a greeting without looking up, assuming it was a customer. When no one responded, she glanced toward the entrance and froze. Marcus stood just inside the door, looking exactly as she remembered. Expensive suit, confident posture, and that smile that had once seemed charming but now just looked predatory. "Hello, Aria. You've been hard to find." Her phone was in the back room. The door was 15 feet away, but Marcus was between her and it. Her mind raced through options, trying to stay calm even as fear spiked through her veins. "You need to leave," she said, proud that her voice came out steady. "Now. I just want to talk." 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking. You owe me that much after the way you left. I don't owe you anything, and I'm not alone here." A lie, but hopefully a convincing one. Marcus glanced around the empty store. "Really? Because it looks pretty empty to me. Come on, Aria, be reasonable." "I've apologized. I've given you space, and you're still acting like I'm some kind of monster. I'm trying to make things right. You called me 30 times in one evening. You showed up at places you knew I'd be. You followed me down the street. That's not apologizing, that's stalking." Aria was edging toward the counter where the store phone sat. If she could just reach it, she could call the police, call Gabriel, call someone. "You're being dramatic," Marcus said, but there was an edge to his voice now. "I ran into you a couple of times in a city where we both live and work. That's not stalking, it's coincidence. But fine, if you want to play the victim, I'll leave. Just wanted you to know what you threw away by being so unreasonable. Good luck with your little bookstore job. I'm sure it pays great." He turned to leave, and Aria felt relief flood through her. But then he paused at the door, looking back at her with cold eyes. "You know, I could make things very difficult for you if I wanted. One call to the right people and no one in this industry would touch you. Think about that." Then he was gone, the door chiming cheerfully behind him as if nothing had happened. Aria's legs gave out and she sank to the floor behind the counter, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. She wanted to cry, to scream, to throw something. Instead, she pulled out her phone with trembling hands and called Gabriel. He answered on the first ring. "Hey, I'm just finishing up here. Should be back in 30 minutes. Marcus was here." Her voice broke on his name. "He came into the store. He threatened me. I'm on my way." "Lock the door. Go to the back room. Call 911 right now." Gabriel's voice was hard and controlled, but she could hear the fear underneath. "I'll be there in 10 minutes. Aria did as he said, calling the police while locked in the back room with her heart hammering. The operator was kind and professional, promising to send an officer right away. Aria gave a statement over the phone, her voice mechanical as she recounted what had happened. Gabriel burst through the back door 7 minutes later, looking wild-eyed and dangerous in a way she'd never seen. He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe, and she felt him shaking as much as she was. "I'm sorry," he said into her hair. "I'm so sorry I wasn't here." "Not your fault," Aria managed. "You couldn't have known." The police arrived, took detailed statements from both of them, and promised to pay Marcus a visit for questioning. With this incident added to their previous report, they said Aria now had grounds for a restraining order if she wanted to pursue one. She said yes, immediately. Over the next few days, Gabriel hired a security system for the store, complete with cameras and an alarm. He refused to leave Aria alone in the building, rearranging his schedule so someone was always there with her. Aria felt guilty about the expense and disruption, but Gabriel was immovable on the subject. "Your safety matters more than money or convenience," he said flatly. "This isn't negotiable." The restraining order was granted, prohibiting Marcus from coming within 500 feet of Aria, her home, or her workplace. The judge who issued it looked stern and disapproving as she read through the documentation Aria had compiled, all the dates and times and incidents she'd carefully recorded. "This should have been done months ago," the judge said. "Mr. Patterson's behavior is textbook harassment. If he violates this order, he will be arrested. I'm also recommending that his employer be notified of this order." That last part gave Aria a fierce satisfaction. Maybe having his bosses know would finally make Marcus understand that his behavior had real consequences. For a week, everything was quiet. Aria started to breathe easier, to believe that maybe this nightmare was finally over. She and Gabriel fell back into their routine, working together during the day and spending evenings at his apartment, talking and laughing and building something beautiful despite the ugly shadow Marcus had cast. Then Gabriel sat her down one evening and told her something that changed everything. "I need to be honest with you about something," he said, and Aria's heart immediately started racing. Those words never preceded anything good. "Okay," she said carefully. "When I said my family has money, I wasn't entirely clear about how much money. My grandfather's pharmaceutical company, it's Whitmore Pharmaceuticals, one of the largest in the country. My father is the CEO and the family fortune is, well, it's substantial. Aria blinked, processing this. How substantial? Last Forbes estimate was around 2 billion. Gabriel watched her face carefully. I have a trust fund that I access to buy the building and start the bookstore, but I'm also listed as a partial owner of the company through family shares. On paper, I'm worth somewhere around 300 million, though most of that is tied up in assets I can't easily access. $300 million, Aria repeated slowly. You're telling me you're worth $300 million, and you own a struggling bookstore that makes maybe $50,000 a year in profit. The bookstore isn't about money. I thought I made that clear. Gabriel reached for her hand, but Aria pulled back, standing up and pacing the length of the living room. Why didn't you tell me this before? We've been together for months, Gabriel. I've told you everything about my life, my fears, my financial struggles, and you just conveniently forgot to mention that you're secretly a multimillionaire. I didn't forget. I made a choice not to tell you because I wanted you to see me, not my family's money. Every relationship I've had falls apart once people know about the fortune. They start treating me differently, start expecting things, or they want me to be someone I'm not. You treated me like a regular person who owns a bookstore, and I loved that. But I'm not treating you like a regular person. I'm treating you like a person I don't fully know because you kept a massive secret from me. Aria heard the hurt in her own voice. I thought we were being honest with each other. I thought we were building something real. We are, Gabriel insisted, standing and moving toward her. This doesn't change anything between us. It changes everything. You've been watching me stress about money, about my car breaking down and not being able to afford repairs, about stretching my grocery budget, and you never once thought to mention that you could buy me a fleet of cars without blinking. That makes me feel like a charity case, Gabriel. You're not a charity case. You're my girlfriend and my employee, and I pay you fairly for your work. The money I have has nothing to do with us. Except it does, because it's part of who you are and you hid it from me. What else are you hiding? Aria knew she was being unfair, lashing out from hurt and confusion, but she couldn't seem to stop. Gabriel's expression hardened. Nothing. I'm not hiding anything else. I was trying to protect what we have, but clearly that was a mistake. They stared at each other across the suddenly vast space of the living room, and Aria felt tears burn her eyes. I need some time to think. I'm going to go home. Aria, please, don't leave like this. But Gabriel didn't move to stop her when she grabbed her bag and headed for the door. She cried the entire bus ride home, feeling stupid and hurt and confused. She understood why Gabriel had kept his wealth secret, could even respect his desire to be seen for himself rather than his money. But the magnitude of the deception felt huge, and she didn't know how to reconcile the man she'd fallen in love with, and this secret billionaire who'd been watching her struggle without saying anything. Her phone buzzed with texts from Gabriel throughout the evening, but she couldn't bring herself to read them. She needed space to think, to figure out what she felt beyond the immediate hurt and anger. But by morning, perspective had crept in. Gabriel hadn't lied to her. He just omitted information about his background. Information that, she had to admit, would have colored her perception of him from the start. She would have been intimidated, would have second-guessed everything, would have wondered if he was slumming it with her for some twisted rich person reason. Instead, she'd gotten to know him as just Gabriel, the bookstore owner who made good coffee and recommended books and kissed her like she was precious. She called him around 8, knowing he'd be at the store already. He answered on the first ring. Aria, thank God, I've been losing my mind. I'm sorry I left like that, she said. I was hurt and I needed to process, but I think I understand now why you didn't tell me. I should have told you sooner, Gabriel said. "You're right that it's part of who I am, even if it's a part I don't particularly like or want to define me. I was wrong to keep it from you, especially after we got serious. Can you forgive me?" "Already forgiven. But Gabriel, we need to be completely honest with each other from now on. No more big secrets, even if the motivation is good. We can't build a life together on partial truths." "Agreed." "Completely agreed." She heard relief flooding his voice. "Does this mean you still want to build a life together?" "Yes, you idiot. It takes more than finding out you're secretly rich to scare me off, though I'm now questioning every time you said the bookstore couldn't afford something." "The bookstore genuinely can't afford most things. I keep my personal money and business money completely separate. That's important to me." Gabriel paused. "Will you come to the store? I miss you, and we have 4 boxes of new inventory that needs processing, and I have no idea what your system is." Aria laughed despite herself. "I'll be there in an hour." When she arrived, Gabriel was waiting by the door. He pulled her into a hug that lifted her feet off the ground, and she wrapped her arms around his neck and held on tight, breathing in the familiar scent of him. "I love you," he said into her hair. "Money and bookstores and everything else aside, I love you. That's the only thing that really matters." "I love you too," Aria replied. "Now put me down and show me these boxes you apparently can't handle without me." They fell back into their rhythm, working side by side, and by afternoon it felt like the argument had never happened. Except now, Aria knew the full picture of who Gabriel was, the complicated family history and the massive wealth he'd rejected in favor of following his passion. It made her love him more, not less, understanding the courage it took to walk away from expectations and build something meaningful on his own terms. The weeks that followed were some of the best of Aria's life. The bookstore threw a 6-month anniversary celebration for her employment, which was Gabriel's excuse to tell all their regular customers about her brilliant marketing work and how she'd transformed the business. The customers brought her flowers and cards and book recommendations, and she felt more valued and appreciated than she had in her entire previous career. Marcus, bound by the restraining order, had gone quiet. Aria began to believe she was finally free of his shadow. She moved some of her things into Gabriel's apartment after he asked her to, not quite living there full-time but spending more nights in his bed than in her own. They talked about the future in concrete terms now. Gabriel wanted to know if she'd be interested in eventually becoming a full partner in the bookstore, not just an employee but an owner with equity and decision-making power. Aria wanted to know if he saw children in their future, because she did, someday when they were ready. "I see everything in our future," Gabriel told her one night, wrapped around her in the darkness of his bedroom. "Marriage, kids, growing old together surrounded by books, all of it as long as it's with you." "That sounds perfect," Aria whispered back and meant it with her whole heart. 6 months after they'd started dating, Gabriel took her to dinner at the same Italian restaurant where they'd had their first date. Aria knew something was different when he seemed nervous, fidgeting with his wine glass and barely touching his food. When dessert arrived, there was a ring box nestled next to the tiramisu. "Aria Novak," Gabriel said, taking her hand across the table, "you ran into my bookstore running from danger, and you ended up being the safest, best thing that ever happened to me. You're brilliant and brave, and you make me laugh every single day. Will you marry me?" Aria was crying before he finished, nodding so hard she probably looked ridiculous. "Yes, absolutely yes." The ring was perfect, a simple sapphire surrounded by small diamonds, elegant and understated and exactly her style. Gabriel slipped it onto her finger and then came around the table to kiss her properly while the other diners applauded. "I can't believe you proposed in a restaurant," Aria said when they finally came up for air. "That's so cliché." "I proposed in the restaurant where we had our first real date, where I knew for certain I was falling for you because you argued with me about whether the martinis were better than the wine, and then proved your point by making me try yours," Gabriel corrected. "That's romantic." "You're right." "It's perfect. You're perfect." She kissed him again, not caring who was watching. They set a wedding date for the following spring, wanting time to plan but not wanting to wait too long. Gabriel's parents were surprisingly supportive, with his mother immediately offering to help with arrangements and his father pulling Gabriel aside to tell him he was proud of the life he'd built and the woman he'd chosen. "I think he meant it," Gabriel told Aria afterward, sounding slightly stunned. "He actually said the bookstore was a success and you were impressive, and he was glad I'd found my place." "Maybe seeing you happy finally made him understand," Aria suggested. "Parents want their kids to be happy, even if they don't always show it the right way." Her own parents adored Gabriel from the moment they met him. Her father, usually gruff and suspicious of anyone dating his daughter, mellowed within 10 minutes of Gabriel asking his opinion about classic cars, which turned out to be her father's secret passion. Her mother pulled Aria aside and whispered that she approved, that Gabriel looked at her daughter like she hung the moon, and that was the most important thing. The bookstore continued to thrive, and Aria officially became a partner 8 months after she'd first run through the door. Gabriel had papers drawn up giving her a 30% stake in the business, which felt both terrifying and incredibly right. This was her place now, too, her success and her responsibility. They hired 2 part-time employees to help manage the increased traffic and expanded event schedule. Aria trained them both, passing on the customer service philosophy that Gabriel had taught her. Every person who walks through the door is looking for something, even if they don't know what it is yet, and our job is to help them find it. Marcus violated the restraining order once, showing up drunk outside Gabriel's building and demanding to see Aria. Gabriel called the police immediately, and Marcus was arrested and spent the night in jail. After that, he finally seemed to get the message, or maybe his employer made it clear that further incidents would cost him his job. Either way, he disappeared from Aria's life as completely as if he'd never existed. The only reminder of that whole ordeal was her increased caution, the way she still checked over her shoulder sometimes in parking lots, or felt a spike of anxiety when someone walked into the store that she didn't immediately recognize. But Gabriel was patient with her moments of fear, always ready to offer reassurance or simply his presence, steady and calming. Their wedding was small and beautiful, held in a garden in late April when everything was blooming. They wrote their own vows, and Aria cried through Gabriel's promises to always lock the door when she needed safety, to fill their life with stories and possibilities, to love her exactly as she was for all the days they had. She promised him adventure and partnership, promised to help build his dreams and share his burdens, promised to love him not despite his complicated past, but because of how he'd chosen to write his own future. They honeymooned in Italy, spending 2 weeks visiting bookstores and libraries and historic sites, eating incredible food and drinking local wine and making love in beautiful hotels. It was perfect and romantic, and everything Aria had never let herself dream she could have. When they returned, Gabriel had a surprise waiting. He'd bought the building next to the bookstore and was having it renovated to expand their space, adding room for a larger events area, a dedicated children's section, and a small cafe. "When did you plan all this?" Aria asked, staring at the architectural drawings spread across their dining table. "I've been working on it for months, Wanted to surprise you." Gabriel wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What do you think?" "I think it's incredible." "I think you're incredible." She turned in his arms to kiss him. "We're going to need to hire more staff, and we'll need to completely rebuild the website to account for the new space, and the marketing for the cafe alone is going to be a full campaign." "Good thing I have a brilliant partner who knows exactly how to handle all that," Gabriel said. They spent the next 6 months managing the renovation and expansion while keeping the original store running. It was exhausting and exhilarating, and occasionally made them want to tear their hair out, but they did it together, making decisions as partners and laughing through the chaos. The grand reopening was a massive event, with local authors, musicians, and what felt like half the city showing up to celebrate. The mayor gave a speech about the importance of independent bookstores to the community. Gabriel and Aria cut a ribbon together, their hands joined on the ceremonial scissors, and when the doors opened to the expanded space, the crowd that poured in was immediate and enthusiastic. "We did it," Aria said to Gabriel that night, long after everyone had left and they were alone in their beautiful, expanded bookstore. "We did," he agreed, pulling her close. "Think we can keep it going?" "Absolutely. We make a good team." "The best team," Gabriel corrected, and kissed her, surrounded by books and dreams and the life they'd built from a moment of fear that had turned into forever. 2 years later, Aria held her newborn daughter in her arms and watched Gabriel try to figure out how to work the car seat, his face a mixture of concentration and terror that made her want to laugh and cry at the same time. "I've read the manual 3 times, he muttered. "How can something so small need such a complicated contraption?" "You'll figure it out," Aria said, that bone-deep exhaustion of new motherhood making everything feel soft and surreal. "You always do." Their daughter, Elena, had arrived 3 weeks early, screaming her arrival into the world with impressive volume. She had Gabriel's dark hair and Aria's nose and both of their stubborn personalities, if her refusal to sleep for more than 2 hours at a stretch was any indication. The bookstore had been running smoothly under their carefully trained staff while Aria took maternity leave. Gabriel worked reduced hours, unwilling to miss these early weeks of their daughter's life. They'd moved to a larger apartment, one with actual rooms and space for the growing family they both wanted. Life was messy and chaotic, and nothing like Aria had imagined back when she was running from Marcus, scared and alone with no idea what came next. But it was also beautiful and full and more than she'd ever dared to hope for. "Got it," Gabriel announced triumphantly, finally figuring out the car seat. He looked up at Aria with such joy on his face that she fell in love with him all over again. "Ready to take our daughter home?" "So ready," Aria said. They drove carefully through the city, Gabriel paranoid about every other driver on the road, Aria twisted in her seat to keep watching Elena sleep in her car seat. When they arrived home, Gabriel carried the car seat like it contained precious treasure, which Aria supposed it did, and they brought their daughter into the home they'd built together. That night, after Elena was finally sleeping and they'd collapsed on the couch in exhausted relief, Gabriel pulled Aria against his side and pressed a kiss to her temple. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For running into my bookstore that day. For taking a chance on me. For building this life with me for her." He nodded toward the bassinet where Elena slept, tiny and perfect. "For everything." Aria tilted her face up to kiss him properly. "Thank you for locking the door and keeping me safe, for seeing me when I needed to be seen, for loving me exactly as I am. For all of this." They sat together in the peaceful darkness, listening to their daughter breathe, and Aria thought about the strange, winding path that had led her here. The fear and uncertainty, the risk of trusting someone new, the courage it took to build something real after everything had fallen apart. She wouldn't change any of it. Not the scary parts or the hard parts or even the moments she doubted everything. Because all of it, every single piece, had led her to this. Gabriel's arms around her, their daughter sleeping safely nearby, and a future stretching out ahead of them full of books and love and possibility. Sometimes the best stories started with running from something that scared you and finding exactly what you needed on the other side of a locked door. Sometimes safety and love looked like a bookstore owner with kind eyes and steady hands who saw you as you were and decided you were worth keeping. Sometimes happily ever after was real, even when you'd stopped believing in it. Aria had run into Gabriel's bookstore trying to escape danger, and she'd found home instead. She'd found partnership and passion, and a love that made sense of all the chaos that came before. She'd found her person, her place, her purpose, and she'd never been more grateful for anything in her life than she was for the moment she'd burst through that door, scared and desperate, not knowing that she was running toward her future instead of away from her past. Not knowing that the man who locked the door behind her would become the one she'd spend the rest of her life opening doors with, exploring every possibility, writing their story one beautiful chapter at a time. Years later, when Alina was old enough to ask, they'd tell her about the day her mother ran into the bookstore and her father locked the door. They'd make it funny and dramatic and romantic, and she'd roll her eyes like teenagers do, but secretly love the story of how her parents met. Maybe someday she'd run a bookstore too, carrying on the legacy they'd built. Or maybe she'd find her own passion, her own path, and they'd support her exactly the way Gabriel's parents had eventually learned to support him. But that was all years away. For now, in this perfect moment, Aria closed her eyes and let herself simply exist in the happiness of having everything she'd never known she needed. Gabriel's heart beat steady beneath her ear, their daughter sleeping peacefully, the quiet understanding that they'd found each other against all odds and built something that would last. This was the epilogue she'd been writing toward her entire life, even when she didn't know where the story was going. This was the happy ending that felt like a beginning, like the first page of a book that promised adventure and comfort and love that would endure whatever chapters came next. And if anyone had told her, on that day when she'd run into Whitmore Books in fear, that she'd end up here, married to the owner with his child in her arms and their expanded bookstore thriving beyond anything they'd imagined, she probably wouldn't have believed them. But belief wasn't always required for beautiful things to happen. Sometimes you just had to be brave enough to run through the door, trust the person who locked it to keep you safe, and see where the story went from there. Aria's story had gone somewhere better than anywhere she could have imagined, and she was grateful for every single word of it.